The morning started like any other Tuesday for Daniel. He woke up at 5:30, just like he had for the past 3 years. The alarm barely made a sound before his hand reached out to silence it. Old habits die hard, and being on time was something his grandmother had drilled into him since he was a boy. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie. The black suit was pressed perfectly, not a wrinkle in sight. His shoes were polished until they gleamed. This was his uniform, his armor. When you worked for people like the Harringtons, appearance mattered. Everything mattered. By 6:15, Daniel was out the door of his small apartment. The drive to the Harrington estate took 40 minutes, but he always left early. Traffic was unpredictable, and Mrs. Catherine Harrington did not tolerate lateness. Not from anyone. The estate sat on the edge of town, hidden behind tall iron gates and perfectly trimmed hedges. It was the kind of place that appeared in magazines, with its white columns and sprawling gardens. Daniel had driven through those gates 1,000 times, but today felt different. He couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the gray clouds gathering overhead, or maybe it was something deeper, something his gut was trying to tell him. He parked the black Mercedes in the garage, checking his watch. 6:55, perfect timing as always. Mrs. Harrington's first appointment was at 9, which meant he had plenty of time to inspect the car, check the route, and be ready. But then his phone buzzed. A text from Helen, the head housekeeper. "Mrs. H wants to see you in her office now." Daniel's stomach tightened. In 3 years, he had never been summoned to her office. Communication usually came through Helen or Paul, the estate manager. Direct contact with Mrs. Harrington was rare, and usually meant something had gone wrong. He walked through the service entrance, his footsteps echoing in the hallway. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Usually by this time there would be activity. The cleaning staff, the gardeners, someone. But today, the silence felt heavy. Her office was on the second floor, overlooking the rose garden. Daniel knocked twice, firm but respectful. "Come in." Her voice was cold, businesslike. He opened the door. Catherine Harrington sat behind a massive oak desk, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Daniel made in a month. Next to her stood Paul, the estate manager, holding a folder. He wouldn't meet Daniel's eyes. That's when Daniel knew. This wasn't about a schedule change or a new route. "Daniel, sit down," Mrs. Harrington said, gesturing to the chair across from her. He sat, keeping his back straight, his hands folded in his lap. Years of service had taught him to stay calm, even when his heart was racing. "I'll get straight to the point," she continued, her fingers drumming once on the desk. "We're making some changes around here. Restructuring the household staff. Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately." The words hit him like a punch to the chest, but Daniel kept his face neutral. "I see. May I ask why?" Mrs. Harrington's lips pressed into a thin line. "It's simply a business decision. We're going in a different direction. Paul has prepared your final paycheck, including 2 weeks severance. That's more than generous, considering the circumstances." "What circumstances?" Daniel asked, his voice steady despite the anger building inside him. She waved her hand dismissively. "Look, this isn't personal. We just need someone who fits better with our current needs. Someone who understands our social circle, our expectations." There it was. Not said directly, but clear enough. Someone who looks the part. Someone who won't raise eyebrows at the country club. Someone who isn't him. Daniel had felt this before. The sidelong glances at fancy events. The way some of Mrs. Harrington's friends would speak slowly to him, as if he couldn't understand basic English. The time one of them asked if he'd played basketball in college, assuming that's how a man who looked like him would end up driving for wealthy families. He'd ignored it all. Did his job. Kept his head down. But this was different. "I've been with you for 3 years, Daniel said quietly. "Never late. Never an accident. I've driven your children safely to school, taken you to every appointment, worked holidays when asked. And this is how it ends?" Paul finally spoke up, his voice uncomfortable. "Daniel, you've been an excellent employee. This really isn't about your performance. Then what is it about?" Daniel looked directly at Mrs. Harrington now. She stood up, signaling the conversation was over. "It's about what's best for this household. Your personal items from the staff quarters have been packed. Paul will escort you out, just like that." 3 years reduced to a cardboard box and a check. Daniel stood slowly. He wanted to say more. wanted to tell her exactly what he thought of her and her business decision. But his grandmother's voice echoed in his head. Keep your dignity, baby. They can take a lot from you, but they can't take that unless you let them. Thank you for the opportunity. Mrs. Harrington, he said, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. He followed Paul down the hallway. The estate manager walked quickly, clearly uncomfortable. At the service entrance, Paul handed him a box and an envelope. For what it's worth, Paul said quietly. I fought against this. You're the best driver we've had. Daniel took the box. But not the right kind of driver, apparently. Paul looked away, guilt written all over his face. I'm sorry. The drive home felt surreal. Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel of his old Honda, the car he'd bought years ago when he first started working. It wasn't fancy, but it was his, paid for with honest work. Back in his apartment, Daniel sat on the couch, the box beside him. Inside were his spare uniform, a coffee mug Helen had given him last Christmas, and a few personal items he'd kept in his locker. 3 years in a cardboard box. He pulled out his phone and stared at it. He should call someone. His mother, maybe, or his buddy Jerome. But what would he say? That he'd been let go for no real reason? That all his professionalism and hard work meant nothing in the end? Instead, Daniel opened his banking app. The severance check had already been deposited. It wasn't much, but combined with his savings, he had enough to survive for a few months. Maybe longer if he was careful. His eyes drifted to the folder on his kitchen counter, the one he'd been avoiding for weeks. Inside were brochures from the Culinary Institute downtown, application forms half filled out, recipes he'd been collecting since he was a kid. His grandmother's recipes, mostly. She'd raised him after his parents died, teaching him that food wasn't just fuel. It was love. It was culture. It was a way to tell stories without words. He'd always dreamed of doing something with that knowledge, but life had gotten in the way. Bills needed paying. Rent was due. Dreams could wait. But now, sitting in his quiet apartment with nothing but time and a severance check, Daniel thought maybe dreams didn't have to wait anymore. He picked up the folder and started reading. Maybe losing everything was exactly what he needed to find something better. The HOA Culinary Institute didn't look like much from the outside. It was tucked between a laundromat and a hardware store on the east side of town. But when Daniel walked through those doors 3 days after losing his job, something inside him shifted. The smell hit him first. Garlic butter, fresh bread. It smelled like possibility. A woman at the front desk looked up from her computer. She was older, with kind eyes and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. Can I help you? I'm here about the evening program, Daniel said, clutching his folder. The culinary arts certificate, she smiled. Perfect timing. We have a new session starting next week. Let me get you an application. That evening, Daniel sat at his kitchen table filling out forms, age, education, work history. There was a section that asked about his cooking experience. He paused, pen hovering over the paper. What could he write? That his grandmother had taught him to make gumbo when he was 8? That he could season a chicken so well it made grown men cry? That every Sunday after church their tiny kitchen would transform into something magical, with pots bubbling and the whole neighborhood finding excuses to stop by? He wrote it all down. Every bit of it. 2 weeks later, Daniel started classes. He was nervous that first night walking into a professional kitchen for the first time. The other students were younger mostly. Kids fresh out of high school with dreams of opening restaurants or becoming famous chefs. Then there was Daniel, 32 years old, starting over. Chef Rodriguez ran the program. He was a short man with powerful forearms and a voice that could cut through the noise of 20 people cooking at once. On that first night, he stood at the front of the kitchen and looked at each student. Some of you think cooking is about following recipes, he said. It's not. Cooking is about understanding. Heat, flavor, timing, respect. You respect the ingredients, you respect the process, and you respect the people you're feeding. Without that, you're just making food. And food is not enough. Daniel felt those words in his chest. That's what his grandmother had taught him. Respect. The first few weeks were brutal. Daniel would finish class at 10, get home by 11, and be up at 6 to start looking for work. He'd taken a job at a warehouse loading trucks. It was hard work, nothing like driving for the Harringtons, but it paid the bills while he studied. His body ached constantly. His hands, used to gripping a steering wheel, now gripped knife handles. He had burns up and down his forearms from hot pans and splattering oil, but he kept going. In class, something unexpected happened. Daniel was good, really good. Not just at following instructions, but at understanding the why behind everything. When Chef Rodriguez demonstrated a technique, Daniel could replicate it almost perfectly. More than that, he could improve it. One night, they were learning classic French sauces. Daniel made his assigned bechamel, but then added something extra. Just a touch of nutmeg and white pepper, the way his grandmother had taught him. Chef Rodriguez tasted it. His eyebrows went up. "What did you do different?" Daniel explained, expecting to be criticized for not following the recipe exactly. Instead, Chef Rodriguez smiled. "This is what I'm talking about. You took something classic and made it yours. That's the difference between a cook and a chef. Keep doing that." After 3 months, Daniel had an idea. It came to him at 2 in the morning when he couldn't sleep. His body was exhausted, but his mind wouldn't shut off. He couldn't afford to open a restaurant. That took money he didn't have. But a food truck? That was possible. Barely, but possible. He ran the numbers. His savings, what was left of the severance, a small loan from the credit union. It would be tight. Really tight. One mistake and he'd lose everything. But what did he have to lose? His fancy job was gone. His nice uniform was in the back of his closet. The life he'd built driving for the Harringtons had disappeared in a single morning. So Daniel bought a truck. It was old, beat up, and needed work, but it ran and it had a functioning kitchen. He spent every free moment fixing it up, painting it, installing equipment. He named it Nana's Kitchen. Simple. Honest. A tribute to the woman who'd given him everything. The menu was small. Jerk chicken with rice and peas, gumbo that simmered for hours, collard greens with smoked turkey, cornbread that melted in your mouth, and for dessert, peach cobbler made from his grandmother's secret recipe. Nothing fancy. Just real food made with love. The first day Daniel opened for business, he parked outside a construction site at 11:30. Lunch rush. He'd made enough food for maybe 30 people, hoping to sell half of it. The construction workers eyed the truck suspiciously at first. New food truck, unknown name. Why risk it when there was a sandwich shop down the street? But then one guy, a foreman with a hard hat and tired eyes, stepped up. "What's good?" "Everything," Daniel said with a confidence he didn't quite feel. "But the jerk chicken will change your life." The foreman laughed. "Big promise. Let me try it." Daniel plated the food carefully. Chicken with charred edges and a glaze that caught the light. Rice and peas seasoned perfectly. A side of coleslaw for crunch. He handed it over. The foreman took one bite. Then another. Then he turned to his crew. "Guys, get over here now." By 12:15, Daniel had sold out of everything. Word spread fast. Construction workers talked to office workers. Office workers told their friends. Within 2 weeks, Daniel had regular customers who showed up wherever he parked. A woman who worked in accounting started bringing her whole department. A teacher from the nearby school ordered lunch for her staff meeting. A mechanic at the auto shop became such a regular that Daniel knew his order by heart. But the real turning point came when a food blogger showed up. Her name was Rita, and she ran a website called Street Eats. She'd heard about Nana's Kitchen and wanted to try it for herself. Daniel served her the same food he served everyone. No special treatment, no extra garnish. Just honest cooking. Rita took pictures, made notes, asked questions. Where did he learn to cook? What inspired the menu? What was his story? Daniel told her. Not everything, but enough. How his grandmother raised him. How food had always been his passion. How he'd lost a job and found a purpose. 3 days later, Rita's review went live. The headline read, "Hidden Gem on Wheels. Nana's Kitchen serves soul food that actually has soul." The review was glowing. She described every dish in detail, talked about the care that went into the preparation, praised the bold flavors and perfect execution. But what really got people's attention was the final paragraph. In a city full of trendy food trucks serving expensive versions of simple food, Nana's Kitchen is the real deal. This is cooking that comes from the heart, made by someone who understands that food is more than fuel. It's memory, culture, and love on a plate. Do yourself a favor and find this truck. Your taste buds will thank you. The next morning, Daniel's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Instagram notifications, people tagging him in posts, comments flooding in. By lunchtime, there was a line 30 people deep. Daniel worked harder than he'd ever worked in his life. Sweat poured down his face. His arms ached. But he couldn't stop smiling. This was his. Not a job someone could take away. Not a position he held at someone else's pleasure. This was something he'd built with his own 2 hands. As the sun set and Daniel finally closed up the truck, exhausted and happy, he thought about Mrs. Harrington. About how she'd dismissed him like he was nothing. Like 3 years of loyal service meant nothing. She'd thought she was getting rid of a problem. Instead, she'd set him free. Catherine Harrington stood in her bedroom staring at her reflection in the full-length mirror. The woman looking back at her seemed tired. When had those lines appeared around her eyes? When had her shoulders started to sag like that? 6 months had passed since she'd let Daniel go. 6 months since she'd taken over the family business after her father's death. 6 months of drowning. Her phone rang. It was Richard Chen, her business partner and the company's CFO. She didn't want to answer, but avoiding him would only make things worse. "Catherine, we need to talk," Richard said without preamble. "The quarterly reports are in and they're not good." "How bad?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "We're down 18% from last year. 3 major clients have pulled their contracts. The board is getting nervous." Catherine closed her eyes. "I'm working on it. Are you?" Richard's voice was kind but firm. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're in over your head. Your father ran this company for 30 years. You can't expect to figure it out in 6 months, especially not without help." After the call ended, Catherine sat on the edge of her bed. Richard was right. She was drowning. The business was suffering because she didn't know what she was doing. She'd been so confident when she inherited everything, so sure she could handle it. After all, she'd grown up watching her father. How hard could it be? Turns out very hard. The problems weren't just at work. Everything at home was falling apart too. The new driver, Kevin, was a disaster. He'd been late 4 times in the past month. Last week, he'd gotten lost taking her to a crucial meeting with investors. She'd arrived 20 minutes late, flustered and unprepared, and the meeting had been a disaster. The house itself felt different too. Helen, the housekeeper, had quit. Something about feeling uncomfortable with the new direction of things. Paul, the estate manager, gave his 2 weeks' notice shortly after. The new staff didn't care the way the old ones had. The gardens looked neglected. The house felt empty. Catherine tried not to think about Daniel, tried not to wonder if she'd made a mistake. But late at night, when she couldn't sleep, his face would appear in her mind. The way he'd sat so calmly in her office that morning, the quiet dignity in his voice when he'd asked why. She pushed the thoughts away. What was done was done. A week later, Richard called again. "I have an idea. There's a restaurant everyone's talking about. Nana's Table. Brand new, but it's getting incredible reviews. The owner is supposed to be some kind of culinary genius who started with a food truck. I thought we could take some potential clients there. Show them we know what's current, what's good." Catherine agreed without much thought. She was too tired to argue, and maybe a nice dinner would help smooth things over with the clients they were trying to win back. The restaurant was in a neighborhood Catherine rarely visited. Not run down, but not the upscale areas she usually frequented. Richard had made reservations for Friday night, 7:30. When Friday came, Catherine almost canceled. She had a headache, and the thought of making small talk with clients exhausted her. But Richard insisted. "This could save the Patterson account. That's $3 million, Catherine. We need this." So she went. Kevin pulled up to the restaurant 15 minutes late because he'd missed the turn. Again. Catherine stepped out of the car, irritated and already regretting the evening. The restaurant's exterior was understated but elegant. Warm light spilled from the windows. A simple sign read Nana's Table in gold script. Through the glass, she could see it was packed. Inside, the atmosphere wrapped around her like a warm blanket. The walls were decorated with black and white photographs of families, kitchens, and ingredients. Jazz played softly in the background. The smell of herbs and spices filled the air. Richard and the clients were already seated. Catherine joined them, apologizing for her tardiness. "No problem," Richard said cheerfully. "We were just looking at the menu. Everything sounds incredible." A waiter came by with water and menus. "Good evening. Welcome to Nana's Table. Our chef takes great pride in every dish we serve. Tonight's specials are posted on the board, but I'm happy to answer any questions about the menu." Catherine barely listened. She was distracted, her mind still on the Patterson account and how badly they needed this deal. They ordered appetizers, entrees, wine. The client seemed impressed by the ambiance, at least. That was something. Then the waiter returned. "Ladies and gentlemen, our chef likes to greet guests personally when possible. He'll be making his rounds shortly." Catherine nodded absently, taking a sip of wine. The appetizers arrived. Fried green tomatoes with a remoulade that was somehow both familiar and surprising. Gumbo that tasted like it had been simmering for days. Cornbread that melted on the tongue. Despite herself, Catherine was impressed. This wasn't just good food. This was exceptional. "Wow," one of the clients said. "This is amazing. Where did this place come from?" Richard pulled out his phone, scrolling. "Says here the chef started with a food truck less than a year ago. Went viral after a food blogger discovered him. Some investors saw potential and helped him open this place 3 months ago. It's been packed ever since." The conversation flowed more easily after that. The clients were relaxed, happy. The food kept coming. Jerk chicken that was perfectly spiced, short ribs that fell off the bone, sides that elevated comfort food to an art form. Then Catherine heard a voice behind her. "Good evening, folks. I'm Daniel, the chef and owner. I hope you're enjoying everything," that voice. She knew that voice. Catherine turned slowly and her wine glass nearly slipped from her hand. Daniel stood there in a crisp white chef's coat, a confident smile on his face. But the smile faltered when he saw her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The table fell silent. Richard looked confused. The client sensed the sudden tension. "Mrs. Harrington," Daniel said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "Welcome to Nana's table." Catherine's mouth went dry. Her mind raced. This was her former driver. The man she'd dismissed 6 months ago. And now he was standing here in his own restaurant, which was clearly successful and respected. "Daniel," she managed to say. I didn't realize that I could cook?" he asked quietly. There was no anger in his voice, but something else. Something that made Catherine feel very small. "No, She couldn't finish the sentence. Daniel nodded slowly. "I hope you enjoy your meal. If you need anything, please let your waiter know." He moved to the next table, greeting other guests with warmth and genuine care. Catherine couldn't focus for the rest of the dinner. The food that had tasted so amazing now sat heavy in her stomach. She watched Daniel move through the restaurant, saw how the staff respected him, how customers lit up when he stopped at their tables. This man had worked for her for 3 years. 3 years, and she'd never once asked him about his life, his dreams, his talents. She'd seen him as a driver. Nothing more. A position to fill, not a person. And when she'd decided she wanted someone different, someone who looked better to her country club friends, she'd thrown him away like he was nothing. But he wasn't nothing. He was this, a chef, an entrepreneur, a man who'd turned rejection into opportunity. The clients were thrilled with the evening. They practically signed the Patterson account right there over dessert. Richard was ecstatic, but Catherine felt sick. As they left, she glanced back one more time. Daniel was in the open kitchen, visible through a window. He was plating a dish with the same careful attention she'd once seen him give to polishing the Mercedes. The same precision he'd used to plan routes and manage schedules. He'd always had this talent. This gift, and she'd never seen it, never asked, never cared to know. Kevin pulled up in the car 20 minutes later than he should have. Catherine climbed in the back, and for the first time in 6 months she allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she'd done. She'd been wrong. Terribly, completely wrong, and she had no idea how to make it right. Catherine couldn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel's face. The way he'd looked at her in the restaurant. Not with anger, but with something worse. Disappointment, pity even. She got out of bed at 3 in the morning and went to her home office. The moonlight streamed through the windows, casting shadows across the mahogany desk her father had used for decades. On her computer, she typed Nana's table into the search bar. The results flooded in. Articles, reviews, social media posts. She clicked on the first one, a feature from the local newspaper dated 2 months ago. From food truck to fine dining, local chef's inspiring journey. Catherine read every word. The article talked about Daniel's start with the food truck, how he'd worked 2 jobs while attending culinary school at night, how his grandmother had raised him and taught him to cook, how he'd faced rejection and turned it into motivation. There was a quote from Daniel that made Catherine's chest tighten. "I learned that your value isn't determined by how others see you. It's determined by what you do when they stop looking. She clicked on another article. Then another. Reviews calling him a rising star in the culinary world. A video interview where he talked about his philosophy on food and community. Photos of him serving meals at a homeless shelter on Thanksgiving. Catherine had known this man for 3 years and hadn't known any of this. Hadn't cared to know. She found Rita's original blog post, the one that had launched everything. The review was beautiful, poetic almost, describing not just the food but the heart behind it. At the bottom of the post, there were hundreds of comments. Catherine scrolled through them, seeing words like incredible, authentic, life-changing. People sharing their own experiences at Nana's kitchen, then later at Nana's table. One comment caught her eye. This man served me the best meal I've had in 10 years, and when I told him I just lost my job, he wouldn't let me pay. Said someone had once believed in him when he needed it most, and he was paying it forward. We need more people like this in the world. Catherine closed her laptop and put her head in her hands. The next few weeks were torture. Catherine couldn't stop thinking about the restaurant, about Daniel. She drove past it twice, not going in, just looking. The place was always busy, always full of life. Meanwhile, her own life continued to crumble. The business stabilized slightly after landing the Patterson account, but she was still struggling. Her reputation in the social circles she'd once dominated was suffering. People were talking. She could feel it in the way conversations stopped when she entered a room. Her friend Victoria pulled her aside at a charity luncheon. "Catherine, darling, are you okay? You look exhausted." "I'm fine," Catherine lied. "You're not fine. Everyone can see it. The business, the house, everything. Your father would be worried." That hit hard. Her father. What would he think of how she'd handled things? He'd built the company from nothing, treated his employees like family, earned respect through integrity. And she'd squandered it all in 6 months. One afternoon, Catherine found herself parked outside Nana's table again. It was 2 o'clock, the quiet time between lunch and dinner service. Before she could change her mind, she got out of the car and walked to the door. It was unlocked. Inside, the restaurant was empty except for a few staff members setting up for the evening. Soft music played from somewhere in the back. A young woman approached her. "I'm sorry, ma'am, we're not open until 5. "I know. I was hoping to speak with Daniel, the owner." "Is he here?" The woman hesitated. "Can I ask what this is about?" "It's personal. My name is Catherine Harrington. He knows me." The woman's expression shifted slightly. Recognition, maybe, or judgment. "Wait here, please." Catherine stood in the empty restaurant, surrounded by those photographs on the walls. She looked closer at them now. Families gathered around tables. Grandmothers teaching grandchildren to cook. Hands kneading dough. Joy captured in black and white. Footsteps approached from the back. Daniel emerged, still in street clothes, not his chef's coat. He looked surprised to see her. "Mrs. Harrington," he said carefully, "this is unexpected." "I need to talk to you," Catherine said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Small. Daniel studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, let's sit." They sat at a table near the window. The afternoon sun cast patterns across the wood. Catherine realized she had no idea how to start. "Your restaurant is beautiful," she finally said. "Thank you. And the food. It was the best meal I've had in years." Daniel nodded but said nothing. He wasn't going to make this easy. Why should he? Catherine took a breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since that night. Actually, I've barely been able to think about anything else." "Okay," Daniel said, his face neutral. "I was wrong." The words came out rushed. "What I did to you. How I treated you. It was wrong, and I'm so sorry." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "What exactly are you sorry for, Mrs. Harrington?" The question caught her off guard. "For firing you. For the way I did it. That's part of it," Daniel said. "But is that really what you're sorry for?" Catherine felt tears prickling at her eyes. "I'm sorry for never seeing you. For 3 years you worked for me, and I never once asked about your life, your dreams, what mattered to you. I saw you as a position to fill, not a person. And when I decided I wanted someone who looked better for my image, I threw you away like you were nothing." Her voice cracked. "But you weren't nothing. You were this. You had all this talent, this gift, and I was too blind and too prejudiced to see it. I judged you based on nothing but my own narrow-minded assumptions." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer. Do you know what hurt the most that day? Catherine shook her head. It wasn't losing the job. Jobs come and go. It was the way you looked at me, or rather didn't look at me, like I was invisible, like 3 years of showing up every single day, of being reliable and professional, meant nothing, like I meant nothing. I know, Catherine whispered. And I'm so sorry. What changed? Daniel asked. Why now? Why come here? Catherine wiped her eyes. Because I've spent 6 months watching my life fall apart, and I realized something. My father built his company on treating people with dignity and respect. He saw value in everyone. I thought I could do it differently. Be more selective, more exclusive. Surround myself with the right kind of people. She laughed bitterly. And you know what happened? Everything fell apart. The business struggled. The staff quit. My friends stopped calling. And all I could think about was you. About how wrong I was. Daniel folded his hands on the table. I appreciate you saying all this, I do. But I need you to understand something. When you fired me, it hurt, bad, but it also freed me. It forced me to chase the dream I'd been putting off. So in a weird way, you did me a favor. I don't deserve credit for that, Catherine said firmly. You did this, all of it. Your talent, your hard work, your dedication. This success is yours, not mine. You're right, Daniel agreed. It is. They sat in silence for a moment. Is there anything I can do? Catherine asked. I know I can't undo what happened, but if there's any way I can help or make amends. Daniel thought about it. Actually, there might be something. Catherine leaned forward. Anything. I'm starting a program, Daniel said. A culinary scholarship for kids who can't afford cooking school. Kids from neighborhoods like the one I grew up in. Kids who have talent but no opportunity. He looked directly at her. The thing is, it takes money. A lot of it. I've got some investors interested, but we need more funding to make it really work, to give these kids a real chance. Catherine understood immediately. This was her opportunity. Not to erase her mistake, but to do something meaningful with her privilege. How much do you need? She asked. Daniel named a figure. It was substantial, but Catherine didn't hesitate. You'll have it by the end of the week. Daniel's eyes widened slightly. Just like that? Just like that, Catherine confirmed. It's the least I can do. Actually, it's nowhere near enough, but it's a start. Daniel studied her face, looking for something. Sincerity, maybe. Or genuine change. Okay, he said finally. Thank you. No, Catherine said, standing up. Thank you. For giving me a chance to be better, to do better. As she walked to the door, Daniel called after her. Mrs. Harrington? She turned back. I forgive you, he said simply. Catherine felt something break open in her chest. Relief. Gratitude. Hope. Thank you, she whispered, and walked out into the afternoon sun. 3 months later, Daniel stood in front of 20 teenagers in the kitchen at Nana's table. It was a Sunday morning, before the restaurant opened for brunch service. The kids looked nervous, excited, curious. Some wore hoodies, others had their hair pulled back. All of them had the same look in their eyes that Daniel recognized. Hunger. Not for food, but for opportunity. Welcome to the first session of the Nana's Table Culinary Scholarship Program, Daniel said, smiling at the group. Some of you might be wondering why you're here. Maybe you applied because you love to cook. Maybe your mom made you. Maybe you just wanted to see what this was about. A few kids laughed. Whatever brought you here, I'm glad you came, Daniel continued. Because this program isn't just about teaching you to cook. It's about teaching you that your circumstances don't define your potential, that where you come from doesn't determine where you can go. He paused, looking at each face. I grew up in a neighborhood a lot like yours. My grandmother raised me in a small apartment where the kitchen was barely big enough for 2 people. But in that tiny kitchen, she taught me something important. She taught me that cooking is about more than following recipes. It's about putting love into everything you do. One girl in the back raised her hand. She looked about 16, with bright eyes and her hair in braids. Is it true you used to be a driver for rich people? Daniel smiled. It's true. I drove for a wealthy family for 3 years. Why'd you stop? A boy asked. I got fired, Daniel said simply. The kids looked surprised. They hadn't expected that honesty. Best thing that ever happened to me, Daniel added, because it forced me to stop playing it safe. It made me chase the dream I'd been too scared to chase before. Sometimes the worst moments in your life lead to the best changes. He walked over to the counter where ingredients were laid out. Today we're going to start simple. We're making my grandmother's cornbread, but first I want each of you to tell me your name and one thing you want to learn here. They went around the circle. There was Ashley, who wanted to open a bakery someday. Brandon, who cooked dinner for his 3 younger siblings every night and wanted to get better at it. Maria, whose parents owned a small restaurant and she wanted to help them. Tyler, who'd never cooked anything in his life but thought it looked cool on TV. Each story reminded Daniel of himself. Kids with dreams, but no clear path to reach them. As they started measuring flour and mixing ingredients, Daniel moved between the stations, offering guidance, answering questions, occasionally fixing a mistake before it became a disaster. The door to the kitchen opened and Catherine walked in. She'd been coming by every few weeks to check on the program's progress. But today was different. Today she was dressed simply in jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. No jewelry, no expensive clothes, just comfortable and ready to work. "Mrs. Harrington," Daniel said, surprised. "I wasn't expecting you today. I know. I hope it's okay that I came." She looked at the kids, then back at Daniel. "I was hoping I could help. If you'll let me." Daniel studied her for a moment. Over the past 3 months, Catherine had been true to her word. The check had arrived exactly when she promised. She'd helped secure additional funding from other donors, but she'd kept her distance, clearly not wanting to intrude. "Can you chop vegetables?" Daniel asked. Catherine smiled. "I'm willing to learn." "Then grab an apron. We're going to need someone to help prep for the lunch lesson." Catherine joined the group, standing at a station next to Ashley. The girl looked at her curiously. "You're the lady who gave the money for this program, right?" Ashley asked. "I am," Catherine said. "Why'd you do it?" Catherine glanced at Daniel, who was helping Brandon with his mixing technique. "Because I learned something important, that when you have resources, you have a responsibility, and that everyone deserves a chance to discover what they're capable of." "That's cool," Ashley said. Then she grinned. "You ever made cornbread before?" "Not once in my life," Catherine admitted. "Don't worry," Ashley said. "I'll help you." Watching them work together, Daniel felt something shift in his chest. This was what redemption looked like. Not grand gestures or dramatic apologies, but showing up, doing the work, learning humility. When the cornbread came out of the ovens, the kitchen filled with that unmistakable smell of home. The kids gathered around, excited to taste what they'd made. Daniel cut pieces for everyone. "This is the moment of truth," he said. "In cooking, you learn fast whether you did it right or not." Tyler took a bite of his piece and his eyes went wide. "Yo, this is actually good. Like, really good." The others agreed, proud of what they'd created. Even Catherine's cornbread, made under Ashley's careful instruction, turned out perfect. After the kids left, promising to return next week, Daniel and Catherine stayed behind to clean up. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, washing mixing bowls and wiping down counters. "Thank you for letting me help today," Catherine said. "I know I didn't do much, but it meant a lot to be here." "You did more than you think," Daniel said. "Ashley was nervous this morning. Having you work beside her, treating her like an equal, that mattered." Catherine smiled, but there was sadness in it. "I spent so many years thinking I was better than other people. Better than you. Better than anyone who didn't fit into my narrow little world, and I missed out on so much." "You're here now," Daniel said. "That's what counts. Can I ask you something?" Catherine set down the dish towel she'd been using. "How did you forgive me so easily?" "I don't think I could have done that." Daniel thought about it. "My grandmother used to say that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. When you fired me, I was angry. Really angry. But I couldn't build something good while carrying all that bitterness." He leaned against the counter. "Plus, staying angry at you would have meant you still had power over me. Forgiving you meant I was free. Truly free." Catherine nodded, her eyes glistening. "Your grandmother sounds like she was an amazing woman." "She was," Daniel said softly. "She died a year before I started working for you. I think about her every day, especially in this kitchen." "She'd be proud of you," Catherine said. "Not just the restaurant or the success, but who you are. The way you treat people. The way you're giving back." "I hope so," Daniel said. They finished cleaning in silence. As Catherine was about to leave, she turned back. "Daniel, I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. Thank you. Not just for forgiving me, but for showing me what it means to be better. You didn't have to give me that chance. Everyone deserves a second chance, Daniel said. Even you, Catherine laughed, wiping her eyes. I don't know about that, but I'm grateful you think so. 6 months later, Nana's Table hosted a graduation ceremony for the first class of the scholarship program. All 20 kids completed the program. Some were already working in restaurant kitchens. Others had enrolled in culinary school. A few had started their own small catering businesses. Daniel stood at the front of the restaurant looking out at the crowd. The kids and their families, his staff, his investors, and reporters from the local news stations. And there in the back, sitting quietly, was Catherine. She caught his eye and smiled. Not the polished, perfect smile she used to wear at fancy parties. A real smile. Proud and genuine. When I started this program, Daniel told the crowd, I wanted to give kids the opportunity I never had growing up. But what I learned is that this program gave me something too. It reminded me why I cook, not for awards or recognition, but because food has the power to bring people together, to heal, to transform lives. He looked at the graduates. You came here with raw talent and left with skills, but more importantly, you learned that your background doesn't limit your future, that hard work and dedication can open doors, that you deserve to take up space in this world. The room erupted in applause. Families cheered. Kids hugged each other. After the ceremony, Catherine approached Daniel. This was beautiful. Those kids are lucky to have you. We're lucky to have each other, Daniel corrected. This wouldn't exist without your support. It wouldn't exist without your vision, Catherine said. I just provided the money. You provided the heart. They stood together, watching the families celebrate, watching dreams taking shape. You know what's funny? Daniel said. A year ago, I thought losing my job was the worst thing that could happen to me. Turns out it was exactly what needed to happen. For both of us, Catherine added quietly. Daniel nodded. She was right. That painful morning in her office, when she dismissed him without a second thought, had set both of them on paths they needed to walk, his toward purpose, hers toward humility. I should get going, Catherine said, but I'll see you next week for the board meeting? I'll be there, Daniel confirmed. As Catherine walked toward the door, Ashley ran up to her. Mrs. H, did you see? I got accepted to culinary school. Full scholarship. Catherine's face lit up. Ashley, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you. Thank you, Ashley said, hugging her. For everything. For believing in us. Daniel watched them embrace. Watched Catherine's eyes fill with tears of joy. And he realized something. Redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about learning from it, growing from it, becoming better because of it. His grandmother had been right about so many things, but she'd been especially right about this. Talent would always rise. Character would always matter. And the best revenge wasn't revenge at all. It was building something beautiful from the ashes of what tried to break you.